I opened her nightstand drawer and froze. Inside was a neatly folded document with my name on it. As I unfolded the paper, my blood ran cold. It was a will. My will. And at the bottom was my signature, except I had never signed it. According to this document, everything I owned would go directly to her. For a moment, I just stared at it, my hands trembling. I thought maybe it was some kind of twisted prank, or maybe I was losing my mind. But the handwriting was mine. The style of my letters, the flow of the strokes, it looked disturbingly close to how I signed my name. Only one problem: I had never written this. I had never even thought about drafting a will at my age. And that's when the thought hit me like a punch to the gut. Someone wanted me gone. Before I go deeper into this, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you like stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next in this one. I carefully refolded the document and placed it exactly where I had found it. If she came back and saw even the smallest detail out of place, she might know I had discovered it. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to act normal. That night, lying beside her in bed, I couldn't sleep. I kept glancing at her, wondering, who was this woman I thought I knew? Was she really capable of plotting something this dark, this calculated? I started replaying the last few months in my head. Things hadn't felt right. She was more secretive, guarding her phone like it held nuclear codes. Late night, yoga classes, random excuses to go out, and an emotional distance that felt like a chasm opening between us. At first, I thought it was cheating. I could have handled that. Painful, sure, but survivable. But now I realized, this wasn't just about betrayal. This was about survival. The detail that really sent chills down my spine was the signature. It was almost perfect. Almost. If I looked closely, I could spot tiny inconsistencies. A curve that was too sharp. A loop that was slightly off. That meant someone had been practicing. Over and over. Someone had been rehearsing my death on paper long before I found that drawer. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she had gone through some estate planning website. Maybe she wanted me to be prepared. Maybe there was some innocent reason. But deep down, my gut knew better. This wasn't about preparation. This was about elimination. The next morning, I acted like nothing was wrong. She made coffee, kissed me on the cheek, and went about her day as if she wasn't harboring a death sentence in her nightstand. I forced a smile, but inside I was on fire. Every laugh, every casual word, felt fake now. She was a stranger. Worse, she was a threat. That day, I made my first move. I snapped photos of the will with my phone, careful not to leave any trace. I studied the details again and again. The dates, the language, the witness lines left blank. It was all there. This wasn't a half-baked idea. This was a plan in progress. But I couldn't confront her. Not yet. If she had gone this far, then I needed proof. Real proof. The kind of evidence that couldn't be denied or explained away. So I started small. I checked her browser history when she left her laptop unattended. There were searches about estate transfers, forgery techniques, even questions like how to contest a will. I checked her phone when she was in the shower, new contacts labeled, with vague names like lawyer and insurance. None of these were in her life before, and then there were the little notes she left lying around, random scribbles with my name, repeating my signature over and over. It was like catching a glimpse of a rehearsal for a play where I was the final ACT. This point, I wasn't just suspicious, I was terrified. I had to tread carefully. One wrong move, and she'd know I was onto her. And if my theory was right, knowing could be deadly. That night, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling while she slept peacefully beside me. My mind was racing. How long had this been going on? Who was helping her? And most importantly, how much time did I have before she tried to make this fake will a reality? I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't trust her anymore. The woman I once loved was now my prime suspect. And from that moment on, it was me against her, whether she realized it yet or not. After finding that will, every little thing she did looked different. The way she smiled, the way she touched my arm, even the way she said goodnight. It all felt like a performance. Like she was playing a role in some twisted theater production where I was the clueless lead. That I started noticing details I had ignored before. She had a new phone passcode that I never saw her type. Her schedule changed out of nowhere, sudden late-night yoga classes, weekend workshops, and excuses that didn't quite add up. The woman who used to call me 3 times a day barely responded to texts now, and when she did, Her answers were clipped, cold. The first real red flag came one Tuesday night. She said she was heading out to yoga, mat under her arm, but her gym bag was stuffed in a way that didn't look right. I casually lifted it when she wasn't looking. It was heavy, too heavy for a yoga mat. I didn't say anything. I just kissed her goodbye and watched her leave, my stomach twisted into knots. That night, I checked our shared bank account. Multiple cash withdrawals. Large amounts. Always just under the daily limit, like she was trying not to trigger suspicion. And when I checked her credit card statement, there were payments to a law office I had never heard of. Not once. Not twice. Repeatedly. The truth was no longer just paranoia. Something was happening behind my back. I knew better than to confront her without proof. If she really was plotting something against me, confrontation could be dangerous. So I played dumb. I laughed at her jokes, cooked dinner, and pretended to be the same trusting boyfriend she thought I was. But inside, I was recording every word, every movement, every strange habit. Point one night, she left her laptop open when she went to shower. My heart pounded as I slid into the chair and clicked into her browser history. Buried between online shopping and recipe websites were darker searches: inheritance laws, life insurance beneficiary, how to authenticate signatures. I snapped pictures of the screen with my phone, careful not to click anything that would mark it as read. When she returned, I was sitting on the couch pretending to scroll through my own phone. She kissed me like nothing was wrong. I smiled back, but behind my eyes was a storm. The strangest thing happened a week later. We were at dinner with some friends of hers I barely knew. In the middle of conversation, one of them slipped and said, "Well, once everything's settled, you'll be fine." My girlfriend quickly cut him off with a laugh, changing the subject so fast it gave me whiplash. Nobody else seemed to notice, but I did. That single sentence echoed in my head the entire night. Was she rehearsing my disappearance with other people? Was this bigger than just her? I went to bed that night replaying the slip-up in my mind, her nervous laugh, the way her eyes darted toward me for just a second before moving on. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, realizing I might not just be up against her. I could be up against a network of people who stood to gain from me being out of the picture. So I tightened my plan. I needed evidence that couldn't be dismissed. Pictures, recordings, documents. I bought a small voice recorder and slipped it into the living room behind a stack of books. I installed a discreet app on the home Wi-Fi router that logged every device and every connection. I even started carrying a backup phone that she didn't know about, in case mine mysteriously went missing. It felt like living a double life, smiling during the day, planning my own defense at night. I couldn't tell friends or family. What if she got to them first? What if they thought I was crazy? I had to walk this road alone, at least for now. The next crack came one Saturday. She left her purse on the counter while she ran out to the car. I spotted a folded piece of paper sticking out of the pocket. I pulled it just far enough to read a line. Policy number, beneficiary. Her name. My name wasn't anywhere on it. My chest tightened as I shoved it back into place. Insurance. She wasn't just thinking ahead. She was preparing for my absence. That was the moment I knew this wasn't in my head. This wasn't just cheating or drifting apart. This was a scheme, a deliberate setup, and I had stumbled right into the middle of it. Lying in bed that night, I looked at her as she scrolled her phone, her face illuminated by the screen. She smiled faintly at whatever she was reading, completely unaware that I had seen behind the curtain. My heart was pounding, but my face stayed calm. She thought she was playing me. But from that night forward, I decided I was going to play her game better than she ever imagined. After weeks of watching her every move, I realized suspicion wasn't enough. If I wanted to survive this, I needed facts. Cold, undeniable proof. And the first place to start was that I had photographed every inch of it. The handwriting, the smudges, even the indentation marks on the paper. I stared at those images on my phone for hours, comparing the curves of each letter to my own signature. To anyone else, it might look perfect. To me, it was almost perfect, and that almost was the key. But my gut wasn't going to be enough in court. Or worse, in the eyes of people who might think I was paranoid. I needed a professional. Someone who could look at this and tell me exactly what I was dealing with. So, under the pretense of a business lunch, I met with an old contact who worked in document analysis. I didn't tell him the whole story, just that I'd found something odd and wanted an opinion. Sitting across from him in a quiet cafe, I slid my phone across the table and held my breath as he zoomed in on the images. He studied the signature silently, frowning slightly. After a minute, he looked up and said, "This isn't natural. Whoever wrote this has practiced a lot. See here? The hesitation marks. And here, the pressure is inconsistent. A genuine signature flows. This one stumbles." My stomach dropped. He didn't know the context, but his words confirmed what I already feared. This wasn't just some random mistake. Someone had been rehearsing my name like an actor learning lines for a play. I asked him what that meant legally. He shrugged. "If you can get the original, a lab could prove it's forged. But right now, it's enough to raise serious suspicion. Just be careful." He said it so casually, but it hit me hard. Be careful. As if he sensed the danger without me saying a word. I left that cafe with my mind racing. My suspicions had just crossed into fact. She was practicing my signature. She was planning ahead. And if she was planning ahead, I needed to plan faster. At home, I acted the same as always. Smiling, cooking dinner, asking about her day. But my mind was already 5 steps ahead, building a strategy. I couldn't let her know I'd taken the will to an expert. I couldn't let her know that I knew. Not yet. That night, I watched her from across the table. She was laughing at something on her phone, her eyes shining with the glow of the screen. To anyone else, she looked like a normal girlfriend scrolling memes. But all I could see was the shadow of the will in that drawer and the faint tremor of my forged signature. Later, when she went to shower, I slipped into her study. I rummaged carefully through her desk drawers, moving slowly so I wouldn't disturb the order. That's when I found a small notebook filled with page after page of my name, written in different sizes, different strokes, like a child practicing cursive. My heart raced as I snapped photos of every page, then returned the notebook exactly where I found it. I stood there in the dark study, the notebook still in her drawer, and I realized this wasn't just about money. This was obsession. This was someone preparing to erase me and replace me on paper. I went back to bed before she finished her shower, pretending to be half asleep when she crawled in next to me. She curled against me like nothing was wrong. But all I could think about was the fact that the woman lying in my arms was training herself to become me, at least on paper. The next morning, I contacted the expert again. I asked if he could connect me with a forensic lab, someone who could analyze original documents when the time came. He agreed, but warned me. If she realizes what you're doing, it could get messy. Don't let her know until you have enough to expose her completely. That warning stuck with me all day. Messy. What did messy look like in this situation? I didn't want to find out. From that moment, I knew I wasn't just collecting proof. I was preparing for a war. A quiet one. A dangerous one. And the first battlefield was my own signature. Once I confirmed the signature was forged, I knew suspicion wasn't enough anymore. If she was willing to put that kind of effort into learning my handwriting, then she was already in too deep. I couldn't just sit around waiting to be blindsided. I needed to flip the script. So I started building my own invisible network. Traps inside my own home. It began with a simple voice recorder, small enough to slip behind a stack of books on the living room shelf. Then I bought 2 discrete cameras, one hidden in a wall clock, the other disguised as a phone charger. I positioned them in places that looked completely ordinary. Anyone walking by would never notice. But I knew they had the best view of the living room and kitchen. I wasn't just thinking about catching her in the act. I was thinking about catching her in the planning. If she had people over, if she spoke on the phone, if she let something slip, I wanted every word. But technology was my real weapon. I logged into our home Wi-Fi router and enabled detailed tracking. Every device that connected, every site visited, every login attempt. It all got recorded and sent to a private account she didn't know existed. Suddenly, I wasn't blind anymore. I could see when her yoga classes coincided with late-night logins from unknown devices. I could see when she downloaded large files or sent encrypted messages. It was like peeling back the curtain on a play I hadn't been invited to. One night, I came home earlier than usual. She was in the kitchen, humming softly, pretending everything was normal. But on my router logs, I had already seen her chatting with someone labeled only as counsel. I had no idea who that was, but from the pattern of messages, it was clear. She wasn't just dabbling. She was planning something coordinated. I played it cool, kissed her cheek, and asked how yoga was. She smiled, said it was relaxing, and carried on. My face didn't move, but inside, every alarm bell was screaming. Later that night, I checked the hidden camera footage. She didn't notice my clock's tiny lens watching as she paced the living room with her phone pressed to her ear. No, he doesn't suspect anything, she whispered. My stomach clenched, then silence as she listened. Yes, the paperwork will be ready. Just make sure it looks clean. No mistakes this time. I paused the footage, my hands shaking. Paperwork. Clean. No mistakes. This wasn't just paranoia anymore. It was a conspiracy unfolding in real time, and I was the target. The next day, I escalated again. I downloaded a secure backup app on my phone that automatically sent all photos, videos, and logs to cloud storage. If something happened to me, or even to my phone, everything would remain safe. I wasn't just protecting myself. I was building a case, brick by brick, at the same time. I forced myself to keep the mask on. We went out to dinner that weekend. She laughed across the table, teased me about ordering the same thing every time. I smiled, played along, and even held her hand. To anyone watching, we were just another couple enjoying date night. But beneath the surface, it was war. Every time she touched my hand, I remembered her voice whispering on that phone call. Every smile was a cover for a plan to erase me. But if she was going to play this game in the shadows, then I was going to become the shadows. By the end of that week, my house was no longer her safe ground. Every word she spoke inside those walls, every call she made, every visitor who came by, I was listening. I was watching. She thought she was in control. She thought I was still the naive boyfriend, too trusting to see the knife behind the curtain. But the truth was, I had already flipped the board, and soon, I'd be ready to show her that the hunter had become the hunted. The first week of recordings gave me more than I expected. At first, it was just small fragments, half sentences, whispers, names I didn't recognize. But as the days went on, the puzzle started coming together. And the picture it painted was darker than I could have imagined. One evening, I checked the footage from the living room camera. She was pacing again, phone pressed to her ear. Yes, I've got the draft. No, he hasn't seen it. He thinks everything's fine. My heart thudded. She laughed nervously, then added, Don't worry. Once the paperwork is in place, it'll be smooth. Smooth. That word echoed in my head like a warning bell. The next night, I caught something even worse. She wasn't alone. A man showed up at the apartment, a stranger I had never seen before. They didn't sit close or act romantic. No, this was business. He carried a folder, which he laid open on the coffee table. Through the grainy footage, I could make out forms, highlighted lines, and her handwriting scribbled in the margins. Insurance, he muttered at one point, his voice low but clear enough. My skin went cold that I leaned closer to the screen, watching her nod, taking notes like a student. They were planning this step by step, as calmly as if they were preparing for a wedding. Only the ceremony in question wasn't mine. It was my disappearance. The man stayed for nearly an hour before leaving. She tucked the folder back into her bag, then poured herself a glass of wine like nothing had happened. I sat there in the dark, watching the playback, my fists clenched. That night, I couldn't lie beside her. Not comfortably. I felt like I was sleeping next to a loaded trap. Every time she shifted, I flinched. Every time she breathed softly, I wondered what promises she had whispered to someone else when I wasn't around. The next morning, I checked the router logs. The visitor's phone had connected to our Wi-Fi, just for a few minutes. That gave me his device ID. A quick trace showed repeated logins from a nearby law office. The name matched one of the payments I'd seen on her credit card. Now I had a connection. Her lawyer friend wasn't just helping, he was drafting documents that could cut me out of my own life. But he wasn't the only one. 2 nights later, another visitor arrived. This time, it was a woman. I recognized her vaguely from one of those workshop weekends she claimed to attend. The audio recorder picked up fragments of their conversation. I started cataloging everything: names, dates, times, documents. I made a spreadsheet on my hidden phone, logging every detail like a detective building a case. It gave me focus. It gave me control, but control was fragile. Every day, I had to face her, smile, and act like nothing was wrong. She would kiss me goodbye in the morning, and all I could think about was the folder I saw on that table. She would ask what I wanted for dinner, and I'd hear her whispering about keeping it quiet. The strangest part? She seemed lighter, happier, almost relieved, as if knowing she had a plan gave her freedom. She didn't realize that her plan was falling into my hands piece by piece. One night, lying in bed, I turned my head and studied her in the dim light. She looked peaceful, maybe even innocent. But I knew better. Behind those closed eyes was calculation. Behind that soft breathing was betrayal. And I made a silent promise to myself. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to turn her whole plan inside out, by the time I saw the second visitor show up at our place with more documents. I realized this was bigger than I could handle alone. I had footage, I had recordings, but I needed someone who could actually turn it into a weapon. If she was building her safety net, I needed to build mine. The next morning, I met with a lawyer. I didn't walk in with a dramatic story. I walked in with evidence. Photos of the will, notes of her strange meetings, and a timeline of withdrawals and searches. He looked through it, adjusting his glasses, and finally said, "If this is what it looks like, you're not paranoid. You're a target. First step, lock down everything you can control." That same afternoon, I made calls. My bank accounts were locked with new security codes. My insurance company put a freeze on any beneficiary changes without my direct voice confirmation. I even filed a notice that no new loans or credit lines could be opened under my name. It felt extreme, but I knew it was only extreme if I was wrong. And I wasn't wrong. At night, lying beside her, she asked why I seemed distracted. I smiled, kissed her forehead, and told her work was stressing me out. Inside, though, I was running through my checklist. She thought she was tightening a rope around me. But I was cutting through the fibers before she even noticed that I also reached out to a private investigator, someone who could follow the people she was meeting. Connect the dots I couldn't. Within a few days, he already had results. "Your girlfriend's lawyer friend?" he said over the phone. "He's not just a lawyer. He runs a side business drafting alternative documents for people who want things done off the record. And that workshop friend? She's tied to him. They've worked together before." Hearing that made my chest tighten. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a coordinated plan. The PI suggested I gather one more layer of protection, a real, notarized will of my own. So the next day, I signed one officially, in front of witnesses, leaving clear instructions that invalidated anything written outside of that moment. If they tried to use the forged one, it wouldn't just look suspicious, it would collapse in court. That night, I came home and she was cooking dinner, humming like everything was fine. She smiled at me, poured me a glass of wine, and asked about my day. I smiled back, but in my pocket was a document that guaranteed her scheme couldn't work, no matter how many signatures she forged. For the first time since this started, I didn't just feel like prey. I felt like someone quietly sharpening a blade. Why now? I had enough pieces of the puzzle to know the endgame was near. They weren't just whispering about paperwork anymore. They were moving fast. So when she casually mentioned having a small dinner with a couple of friends next week, I knew exactly what she meant. This wasn't a social night. This was going to be a strategy session. I smiled and agreed. "Sounds fun," I told her, hiding the storm inside me. She thought she was inviting them into our home. What she didn't know was that I was already turning the house into a stage, and they were about to star in their own downfall. The day before the dinner, I upgraded my setup. I placed an additional camera in the light fixture above the dining table, angled perfectly to catch their faces. I also rigged my smart speaker to respond to a single hidden command, one phrase that would trigger the TV to play selected recordings, her phone calls, the meetings, even the video of the lawyers sliding documents across the table. Meanwhile, my attorney and PI were both on standby. Hale had prepped a packet with all the legal safeguards and evidence. Knox was waiting nearby with contacts in law enforcement, ready to step in if things went south. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It was a carefully built trap, and the dinner was the bait. The night came. I set the table, lit candles, poured wine. Every detail looked like a normal evening. She was in a great mood, humming as she cooked, almost glowing with confidence. For a moment, I almost admired how good she was at pretending. But then I reminded myself, she wasn't just lying. She was plotting to erase me. The guests arrived right on time. The lawyer with his stiff smile, the workshop friend carrying a notebook. We exchanged polite greetings, sat down, and for a few minutes, it looked like an ordinary dinner. Small talk, clinking glasses, the smell of roasted chicken. But then, the tone shifted. They lowered their voices, leaned in close, and the papers came out. I sat there, silent, letting them think I was oblivious. My girlfriend brushed her hair back and said softly, "He won't notice a thing. Once this is signed, everything falls into place." That was my cue. I leaned back, gave the hidden command, and the room froze as the TV flickered to life. Suddenly, their own voices filled the space. Whispers about beneficiaries, about keeping it quiet, about the forged signature. Their heads snapped toward the screen, eyes wide, the color draining from their faces. My girlfriend turned to me, her mouth open, but no words came out. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't the one caught off guard. They were, and in that silence, with the evidence playing on loop behind me, I smiled, not because it was funny, but because the trap had finally sprung. The room was frozen, their own words echoing from the TV. My girlfriend's fork clattered onto the plate. The lawyer's face went pale, and the workshop friend clutched her notebook like it could shield her. Nobody spoke. That's when I stood up, calm, steady. "I think it's time you all met my friends," I said. Right on cue, the door opened. Knox, my investigator, stepped in, followed by two uniformed officers. My girlfriend shot to her feet, stammering, "What is this?" Her voice cracked, stripped of the confidence she'd carried for weeks. "This," I said, nodding to the officers, "is the end of your little project." The lawyer tried to recover, clearing his throat. "This is a misunderstanding," but Knox cut him off, dropping a folder onto the table. Inside were photos, the parking lot handoff, the cafe meeting, the insurance documents. Every move they thought was secret had been captured. The officers didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. One of them calmly read off names, confirming identities, cross-checking the evidence Hale had prepped. The room that had been a stage for their conspiracy was now a crime scene in real time. My girlfriend's eyes darted to me, desperate, searching for some shred of mercy. "You don't understand," she whispered. "It wasn't supposed to go this far." I leaned in, my voice low but firm. "No, you don't understand. You tried to write me out of my own life. And now, you're written into every line of evidence." Her face crumpled. The workshop friend muttered something about a mistake, while the lawyer sat rigid, knowing it was over. The officers collected the papers from the table, bagging them carefully. Knox unplugged the hidden cameras, handing over the recordings. Everything was clean, legal, undeniable. As they were let out one by one, I stood in the quiet wreckage of my dining room. The candles still burned, the food still smelled good, but the illusion was gone. The woman I thought I knew was no longer a mystery. She was just another criminal who underestimated the man she tried to erase. That night, after the last car pulled away, I sat alone at the table, staring at the empty plates. For the first time in months, I felt the tension drain from my body. The trap had worked. The game was over, but as I sipped the last of the wine, one thought stayed with me. Survival wasn't the end. Rebuilding was next. Weeks later, I found myself walking into a courthouse, clutching the folder Hale had prepared. The air was heavy, every step echoing against marble floors. This wasn't just paperwork anymore. It was war in daylight. Across the room sat my girlfriend, flanked by her lawyer friend and the workshop woman. Gone were their confident smirks. They looked small, cornered. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge called the session to order. Hale stood first, her voice steady as she laid out the evidence. The forged will, the recordings, the insurance documents. Every detail was backed by timestamps, witnesses, and certified copies. Then she played the video from my dining room. There, voices whispering about beneficiaries and keeping it quiet. The courtroom was silent except for their own words. Betraying them. My chest tightened as the screen flickered. There she was, the woman I'd once trusted with everything, calmly plotting my disappearance. Watching it in front of strangers made it sting in a way I hadn't expected, but it also felt like vindication. The lie was over. Their defense collapsed quickly. The lawyer tried to argue the recordings were out of context, but Knox's surveillance photos shot that down. The workshop friend claimed she barely understood what was happening, but the notes in her handwriting told a different story. Finally, it was her turn. She stood, her voice trembling. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she whispered. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't look away. I wanted her to see that the man she'd tried to erase was still here, still standing, and stronger than ever. The judge's ruling was swift. The forged documents were invalidated. The conspirators were charged with fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. My name was cleared, my assets protected. And as the officers escorted them out of the courtroom, I felt the weight of months of fear finally lift from my shoulders. Outside, reporters hovered, asking for comments. I shook my head, walking past the flashing cameras. This wasn't a story I wanted to sell. It was a story I wanted to close. That night, back in my apartment, finally my apartment, I sat alone at the table where it all began. No hidden cameras, no staged recordings, no traps. Just me, the silence, and the knowledge that I had turned their scheme against them. The war was over. But the rebuilding? That was just beginning. When the dust finally settled, I realized something strange. My biggest victory wasn't in court, and it wasn't watching them get escorted out in handcuffs. My biggest victory was walking into my own home and feeling safe again. No more hidden whispers. No more forged signatures waiting in drawers. Just silence and freedom that I moved out of the apartment where everything had unraveled. Too many ghosts lived in those walls. I found a smaller place across town, nothing fancy, but mine. Every key, every lock, every document in my drawer was real and under my name. That feeling was priceless that I started pouring my energy back into my work. With all the chaos behind me, projects that once felt impossible suddenly came alive. My focus returned. My confidence grew. Even my health improved. The weight of constant paranoia had taken a toll, but now I was lighter. And for the first time in years, I thought about what I wanted, not what I feared. I signed up for a photography class. I took road trips on weekends, just me and the open highway. I met new people, not through secrets or lies, but through shared laughter and genuine connection. Slowly, I built a life that wasn't about surviving someone else's plan. It was about living mine. Sometimes, I catch myself wondering if she ever regrets it. If she lies awake at night thinking about the man she tried to erase, the man who turned her own scheme into her downfall. Maybe she does. Maybe she doesn't. But it doesn't matter anymore. Her story ended where mine restarted. Now, when I look in the mirror, I don't see the scared guy who found a will in a drawer. I see someone who was tested, betrayed, and pushed to the edge, but came back stronger. And in a twisted way, I'm grateful. Because without that betrayal, I might never have learned just how much I could endure, but I've told you my story. Now I want to ask you, did I do the right thing? What would you have done in my place? If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment below. Your thoughts keep these stories alive, and you won't want to miss what's coming next.